understood Mundell-Fleming. Right, so that was question 4. If you compare the entire tutorial, you might thought this question looks like the easiest. Any budget deficit must be matched by current account deficit. Looks simple, but yet you have to go through many assumptions to get the answer. Okay, so that was the second area of focus, current account deficit. Now, besides this question, the next question the examiner likes to test, okay, and it is so common that you see it literally every year, is your UIP. So some of you, during the lecture, you're very concerned, right? How do you write the UIP with the flow diagram I gave you? So today I'll do a quick demonstration. So you do expect question on UIP, so you must be well prepared. Again, this is a concept you cannot smoke through. You cannot write answers that looks totally out of tangent. You must know the key focus point. So you must be well prepared, at least with the equation and your own numerical example, which I use Singapore $1,000 with US bonds. So I do the conversion rate. Right? So if the question doesn't have any specification of countries, your prepared example will come in. But you cannot merely just show, oh, US 11,000, convert back at how much Sing dollar. You must know how to discuss. Anytime when there is interest rate differential, it will affect exchange rate. Or if there is any exchange rate differential, it will affect interest rates. That is what the UIP is about. It's not about, should I buy US or Singapore bond? It's not. It's that the bonds returns for both will equalize through the prediction of interest rate and exchange rate. Right? So highlight on the key assumption, there must be free capital mobility. Because country with strong currency, the funds will flow in, for example, then interest rate in that country will drop because there's excessive funds. Countries with weak currency, funds will flow up, but the country's interest rate will go up. Alright, so this is a very typical question, and students thought, oh, they should avoid it. But I should say, you should face it, because it is literally one that if you are well prepared, it is a very short answer. There is no diagrams at all. Alright, most of the questions you do has equations that you need to derive or discuss the slope or with curves. You should do a series of concepts in section A that don't need diagram, and this is one of them. Okay, so with that, let's look at question 1 in the tutorial. The question will look very intimidating. Sometimes you read like there's no head and tail. But it's very clear. Okay, question specify uncovered interest parity implies interest rate must be equalized between any pair of countries, means between Singapore and US, with free capital flow. True or false? Okay, right? So let me show you how I approach the question. I will always want to make the statement true first. Don't always go into and challenge the answer. Do the true part first. Right? So first write out the equation. So you must get used to writing this. I did this almost like 10 times already. I will always narrate to myself. I have $1 Singapore, I buy Singapore bond, I earn I. So the equation on the left is the returns of Singapore bond, but must be in Singapore dollar. So you narrate it to the examiner. Equation on the left will show purchase of $1 Singapore bond with interest rate I is the returns of the bond in Sing dollar. But if I take the same Singapore $1, I must convert it to US dollar, so I must multiply by current exchange rate. With the money, I earn foreign interest rates. But the money is in US dollar, so I must convert back to Sing dollar. Right? So over time, you will actually learn to memorize this equation by narrating it to yourself. So you will tell the examiner the equation on the right will reflect the returns of a USA bond expressed in Sing dollar, and they must be exactly the same. Okay, alright? So examiner, don't expect too much. He don't need you to derive. There's no derivation, but application. What is UIP? It says the returns of both are the same in the same currency. Okay, so step 2, answer the question. You are given I equals I star. The question says, right, the interest rate must equalize for any pair of countries. So you pick Singapore and US. You cannot pick Singapore and China. They will mark you down. Right? And you cannot say country A, country B. Because in the lecture notes, I already gave you the series of countries. It's usually Euro and US, Euro with UK, or Singapore with US. Okay? So if I equals to I star, what does the equation say? Therefore, the exchange rate ET over EET plus 1 is 1. Right? That's what the equation says. But what is the implication? Current exchange rate equals to future exchange rate. And this actually implies this could be under fixed exchange rate system. Okay, alright, so you prove the statement to be true. Alright, there is no exchange rate movement. Okay, so therefore, due to no expected change in future exchange rate, there is actually no movements of funds, whether it's in or out of Singapore. Alright, so therefore, no change in interest rate. That's what it meant. Right, the exchange rate stays the same. Right, so in the future it's the same, so you don't need to move the funds in and out of Singapore. If it is stronger, the funds will come in. If Singapore dollar is weaker, the funds will flow out, then it affects Singapore interest rate to correct itself. But now, no need. The funds just stay in the respective country as the same amount. I equals I star. Now, I have actually explained UIP already. What is UIP? The returns must be the same. Alright? So there is no adjustment in interest rate at all. But the good exam answer will highlight, however. Okay? Countries usually use flexible exchange rate. Okay? Alright? Okay? For example, right? Due to market forces, EET plus 1 will go up. Means Sing dollar can be expected to appreciate. Okay, so you apply the UIP. The UIP says if your currency is expected to appreciate, the interest rate gap would be exactly the opposite. That is, interest rate in Singapore would be lesser than interest rate in US. Initially, they are the same. Right? But in the actual world, countries adopt flexible exchange rate. Currency can go strong because of NX flowing in. So with a stronger Sing dollar, exchange rate differential is positive, but interest rate differential is negative. Okay, then in this case, use numerical example. I don't need you to copy, okay? We'll go to my exam answer. You will see how I phrase it, but just if you're copying down this outline, just jot it down. You're going to explain the numerical example, which is actually case B in the lecture notes. Okay, so once you're ready, let me remove this. I'll come back in a moment. This is how I do it. You see? I write in words. And I use very simple numbers. Okay, so don't copy, go back, read through. I will say, there's an investor in Singapore. He has Singapore $1,000. He's considering whether he wants to buy a foreign bond, US. Payment is 10%. Alright? So if the current exchange rate is 1:1, it means you will get US $1,000 and earn a 10% interest rate. The returns will be $1,100 US. So I explained that little u in words. Right? With 1,000 current exchange rate, what I get. Okay? Then I analyze like what I wanted. If I expect Sing dollar to appreciate and I give it a number, 2%. Remember in the exam, you're going to have a calculator, so don't come up with funny figures. So in other words, the exchange rate will become 1.02. So you take 1,100 divide by 1.02, you will get about 1080. So you have to memorize this figure yourself first. If you can't remember 1080, you can put there or less than Singapore 1100. Remember, don't get trapped. It's not about the answer, it's about the skill set. So in this case, right, it means the returns of the Singapore bond, your $1,000 must also give you 1080. So the Singapore interest rate therefore must be 8%. Okay, because 8% of Sing 1,000 is $80. So that's how you prove that Singapore interest rate is 2% lower than I star. Right? And therefore you have proven that interest rates need not equalize. Right? Okay, so in the real world, okay, if your currency has movements, exchange rate don't equalize, but the returns is the same. It's exactly Singapore 1080. So this is what I meant to write it in one paragraph, one or two paragraphs in words. You cannot use that arrows and the bubbles that I use. They're not counted. And they're not difficult. So that's what I meant. Prepare your answer. Alright? So that when you go in, you're ready to tackle the question. But a good exam answer, don't just explain, but give the economic intuition. Why must Singapore interest rate drop? Not because the equation says so. So the intuition is because if Sing dollar is expected to appreciate, then, alright, they will expect a lot of currency inflow. Funds will like to flow in. People like to hold the Sing dollar and buy our bonds. So in this case, alright, with excessive funding in Singapore, financial institutions in Singapore will cut interest rate. Alright, that's why interest rate in Singapore is 2% lower than US. So this is how I answer the question. Right? I explain how UIP works. It says interest rate may not be the same, but the returns are exactly the same. And the key assumption is there is perfect capital flow. That's why with the strong funds flowing in, then interest rate in Singapore will drop. If there is no perfect flow of capital, interest rate in Singapore may not need to drop, or may not need to drop 2%, maybe just drop 1%. Then the UIP cannot work already. Alright, so this is the examiner's expectation from you. So if they don't give you any interest rate, any countries, you can use this standard example. Okay, but the practice question I included in your notes, right, will show if the exam question is this manner, it's actually more difficult. They specify 2 countries, 2 interest rate. Then you have to decide yourself who is local, who is foreign. So you may want to pick US as local. Okay, then Europe as foreign. So if US interest rate is 2% lower, alright, US exchange rate must be 2% stronger. Alright, so that the UIP will work. But for that to happen, there must be perfect capital mobility. Okay, alright, so when question gives you countries and interest rates, that will become very difficult. But don't give it a miss. Okay, compare this question with the current account question. This question at least is still manageable as long as you can display how much you understood from UIP. Okay, alright, so with that, that sums up your section A discussion, right, for topic 6. It's not going to be easy, but you cannot afford to drop it. You have to do 8 out of 10 questions. You cannot drop this because once you drop, you don't have enough questions to do in section A. Don't think picking from 10 is easy. Sometimes you can only pick 6. That's why if you have a bigger range of questions, you move yourself between 6 to 7.